I knew something was off the moment I missed my third utility bill in a row. I'm not the kind of guy who forgets due dates. I'm a paramedic, for God's sake. My name's Kellen Kirk, and I live in a quiet cul-de-sac in a neighborhood that only looks peaceful from the outside. On the inside, it's ruled by the HOA and worse by Elaine Overton. Elaine is your textbook HOA Karen. Mid-50s, sharp bob haircut, drives a beige Lexus, and has a voice that sounds like it's permanently annoyed at your existence. She's also the self-appointed president of our HOA. Despite being elected in a meeting, only 3 people showed up, to 2 of them being her bridge buddies. I'd had run-ins with her before. She once filed a formal complaint because my trash can was visible from the street for 10 minutes after pickup, but I kept my head down until the mail started vanishing. One week, it was just my water bill. Annoying, but I paid it online. The next, my mother's birthday card never arrived. Then came the missing Amazon packages, a jury summons notice, and finally a letter from my mortgage lender marked second notice. That's when I realized this wasn't just the mailman being lazy. Someone was intercepting my stuff. I talked to a few neighbors. Turns out I wasn't the only one. My magazine stopped coming months ago, said Mr. Paulson, 2 houses down. Elaine told me to stop cluttering the mailbox with non-essential trash. That settled it. I bought a small security camera and installed it inside my mailbox post. It was legal, I checked. I aimed it right at the front flap, angled perfectly for anyone reaching in. 3 days later I had footage, and it made my blood boil. There she was, Elaine Overton. Middle of the afternoon, in broad daylight, walking her rat-sized dog and wearing that ridiculous HOA badge around her neck like she was Secret Service. She opened my mailbox, pulled out my mail, gave it a quick scan, and dumped it into the shopping bag she was carrying. I watched the video 10 times. Each time I caught something new. She wasn't just stealing, she was selectively stealing. Anything with a barcode or government seal, gone. Flyers and coupons, left behind. I copied the footage to a USB drive and dropped it in a folder marked HOA Felony Evidence. Then I called my buddy Darren. He's a deputy with the county sheriff's office. You got video proof? He asked, crystal clear. I'll be there in 10. Deputy Darren didn't waste time. He rolled up in his cruiser just after dark, headlights off, engine humming low. I met him at the side gate away from the streetlights and walked him straight to the garage where my laptop was set up with the footage paused on Elaine's hand mid-theft. He leaned in close, watching the screen. That her? No doubt, that's my mail in her bag. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he rewound the footage, paused again, zoomed in. The timestamp and address overlay were clearly visible. Her face was lit by the sun, no room for doubt. All right, Darren said, standing up. This qualifies as mail theft. That's federal. I'll need to loop in a postal inspector. But if she's been doing this to others too, she has, I cut in. At least 3 neighbors, probably more, his eyes narrowed. Then we've got a pattern. That raises it to aggravated mail theft. If she tampered with anything, official loans, court notices, government checks, she's looking at prison time. He didn't exaggerate. I knew Darren well enough to tell when he was serious, and right now he looked stone cold. I'll start the paperwork, he continued, but keep this quiet. If she finds out we're onto her, she'll lawyer up fast or destroy evidence. I nodded. Already backed up the footage in 3 spots, one on a drive off-site. He cracked his neck. Good, I'll be back tomorrow with someone from the Postal Inspection Service. They'll want to talk to you and anyone else willing to go on record. The next morning, I took the day off. I wasn't scheduled anyway, and no way was I risking missing this. At 9 sharp, Darren returned, this time with a guy in a plain charcoal suit and a leather briefcase. His ID said Inspector M. Garvey, USP's Office of Inspector General. He didn't shake hands, just said, "Show me the footage." Within minutes, Garvey was swiping through every clip I had, nodding every so often, occasionally jotting notes. Once he finished, he turned to me. "You said others are affected. Names?" I gave him a list. Mr. Paulson, Mrs. Lai from the next block, and the Nguyens across the street. They'd all mentioned strange disappearances over the past few months. Garvey adjusted his tie. We'll need statements. And if they have any documentation, missing checks, letters, anything, they should bring copies. By noon, he had more than enough to act. Darren made a few calls, stepped outside, and came back in with a quiet nod. Warrants being approved. We'll serve it tonight. I didn't expect the bus to feel this tense, but as twilight settled in and the cruisers lined up 2 blocks away, everything in me tightened like a coiled spring. Garvey had gone with them to oversee it. I watched from my upstairs window, lights out, heart thudding. At precisely 8:17, they approached her front door. 3 officers, calm and quiet, no sirens. Elaine answered in a robe, hair half done. At first she looked confused, then defensive. Then panicked. When they stepped inside, she tried to slam the door. Bad move. One of them wedged his boot in the frame and pushed forward. She stumbled back. Less than a minute later, they walked her out in cuffs. She was yelling something about neighborhood authority and protecting community standards, but no one was listening. The moment the cuffs clicked, her power evaporated. Neighbors had started to gather on the sidewalks, whispering, some filming. No one stepped forward to defend her. Darren returned an hour later. We found bins in her garage, full of shredded mail, some unopened stuff stashed under tarps. She'd been sorting through it like it was inventory. He handed me a sealed envelope. They found this tucked behind paint cans. It's your jury summons. I opened it and stared. It had been torn at the edge, like she'd tried to open it without making it obvious. Why would she even care about this? I asked. Because if someone misses enough court dates, Garvey said, stepping through the garage door, a bench warrant gets issued. If she could get enough people to rack up fines or legal trouble, she might have thought she could acquire foreclosed properties through the HOA. She was trying to force people from their homes, I asked, stunned. She's not the first, Garvey said grimly. It's happened before. Corrupt HOA presidents intercept legal notices, wait for homeowners to miss deadlines, then swoop in on technicalities. Usually it doesn't work, but if no one notices the mail is missing, my blood went cold. So she wasn't just being nosy, she was playing long-game sabotage. Garvey nodded once. And now she's going to prison for it. The fallout came fast. With Elaine in custody, the HOA board scrambled. Her vice president, a guy named Rick who always wore polo shirts tucked into his jeans, tried to hold an emergency meeting the next day. Only 2 people showed up. Turns out Rick had known about the mailbox audits. He claimed they were internal compliance checks. That didn't sit well with anyone, especially not the Nguyen's, who found a shredded check for their son's college fund in the bin. By the end of the week, Rick resigned. The treasurer followed. The whole board collapsed like a wet paper bag. I didn't want to take over, but we needed someone to stabilize things. So I nominated Mrs. Patel, a no-nonsense retired judge who had just moved in 6 months prior. She accepted on the condition that no board member would have unilateral authority again. Under her leadership, we rewrote the bylaws. Mailboxes became off-limits to all HOA personnel. Any violation meant instant removal and referral to authorities, no exceptions. We held a neighborhood meeting in the community park. Everyone came, even people I'd never seen before. Garvey made a surprise appearance, giving a brief rundown of what Elaine had been charged with: multiple counts of felony mail theft, obstruction of legal process, and conspiracy to defraud homeowners. She was denied bail. After the applause died down, Mrs. Patel took the mic and said, "This neighborhood doesn't belong to any one person. It belongs to all of us. And if anyone tries to take that away again, they'll face more than just complaints, they'll face consequences." The crowd roared. As we packed up, Paulson approached me. "You still got that camera in your mailbox?" I chuckled. "Nah, took it down, don't need it anymore," he nodded. "Still, glad you put it up. You saved a lot of us from a real mess." I looked around at the families laughing, kids playing, music drifting from a Bluetooth speaker near the benches. For the first time in months, the air felt light. "No," I said, "we all saved each other." And for once, that wasn't just something people said. It was the truth. 3 weeks after Elaine's arrest, I was called to testify before a grand jury. I'd never been inside a courtroom for anything other than traffic duty, and this was a whole different atmosphere, sterile, controlled, and humming with quiet, serious energy. A federal prosecutor named Angela Mendez led the questioning. She had a way of pausing just long enough after a question to make you feel like the entire room was holding its breath. "You personally retrieved the footage from your mailbox camera?" she asked. "Yes. And you did not alter or edit the footage in any way?" "No." I gave a full copy to Inspector Garvey the same day. She motioned to the screen as the jury watched Elaine rifling through my mail. The room stayed silent except for the soft click of the video playback. One juror, a man with wireframe glasses and a notepad covered in loops of handwriting, shook his head slowly as Elaine dropped my jury summons into her tote bag. By the time I stepped off the stand, I felt like I'd just run a marathon. Angela gave me a polite nod. "Your testimony helped solidify our timeline," she said. "We believe she started targeting mail as early as February, just before the HOA began its aggressive push for lien authority." I frowned. Lien authority. She proposed an amendment allowing the HOA to place liens on properties over unpaid fines and non-compliance fees. The board barely passed it. I didn't need to ask how that connected. The timeline spoke for itself. Back home, the neighborhood had shifted. You could feel it. People who used to rush inside after work now lingered on driveways, chatting across hedges. A few families organized weekend cleanups just for fun. The Nuyens hosted a movie night on their lawn with a projector and popcorn machine. No one asked permission. Mrs. Patel had thrown out the old meeting format entirely. Instead of closed-door sessions, she held community forums on the first Saturday of each month, folding chairs, open mic, and coffee from the local roaster. I went to the first one, mostly out of curiosity. A man in a worn denim jacket stepped up, someone I hadn't seen before. Introduced himself as Hank, said he was a contractor who'd sold his house in another HOA community after going through something real similar. His voice had a rasp to it, like gravel underfoot. "Thing is," he said, addressing the crowd, "these folks count on people not asking questions. They use paperwork like a weapon. If someone hadn't put a camera in that mailbox, we'd still be in the dark." He turned toward me. "Appreciate what you did, son." I just nodded. I wasn't looking for applause, but I did feel something shift in that moment, a kind of unspoken agreement passing between every person under that tent. The next week, a dark green envelope arrived at my door, hand-delivered. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a list of names, residents from 2 streets over, and a note. "Check on them. They stopped receiving water bills too." I didn't recognize the handwriting, but I did recognize one of the names, Mildred Carver. She'd been in the neighborhood since the place was built, and she rarely left her house. I walked over just before sunset, knocked, and waited. She opened the door slowly, eyes wary. "You're Kellen, right? The one with the camera?" I nodded. She stepped aside, motioned me in. Her living room was packed with cardboard boxes, each labeled with months and years. She pointed to a stack by the fireplace. "Those are my records. I've had missing bills since March. I thought it was a city issue." I opened one and pulled out a utility statement. Sure enough, 3 consecutive months had handwritten notes. "Called city, no answer." "Called HOA, Elaine said nothing to worry about." "Did she ever bring you bills herself?" I asked. She said she'd streamline the process to help older residents. I didn't think twice at the time. We spent the next hour cataloging every missing document. By the time I left, I had enough to fill a folder and a sinking feeling in my gut. Elaine hadn't just targeted random people, she'd focused on the ones least likely to question her. I took everything straight to Darren. "She was filtering mail based on vulnerability," I said. "People with health issues, people who didn't drive, folks she thought wouldn't push back." He scanned through the files, jaw clenched. "This is predatory. We're not just talking about theft anymore." We're looking at elder abuse, maybe even financial exploitation. That kicked off a second investigation, this time with the county's Elder Protection Unit. They interviewed Mildred and 4 others, all of whom described similar patterns. Elaine had offered to help manage their bills, then stopped forwarding notices. In 2 cases, she'd even redirected refund checks by changing mailing preferences online. Meanwhile, the forensic team combed through her personal computer, which had been seized during the warrant. Hidden in a password-protected folder titled HOA Business, they found spreadsheets tracking resident compliance scores. It included categories like pushback level, financial liquidity, and no family nearby. Angela called me 2 days later. She was building profiles, she said, using them to decide who to pressure, who to isolate, and who to make disappear on paper. Disappear, I echoed. She submitted fake contact information to city records, changed addresses on file. In one case, she rerouted a foreclosure notice to a vacant lot 2 towns over. My stomach turned. How long does someone like that get, I asked, if convicted on all counts? Angela sounded grim. She's staring down 15 to 20 years. Minimum. The trial date was set for early fall. I wasn't scheduled to testify again, but Angela kept me updated. During pre-trial hearings, Elaine's attorney tried to downplay the charges, calling her overzealous and misguided in her interpretation of community management responsibilities. The judge wasn't buying it. Especially not after the city's IT department confirmed she'd used HOA funds to pay for a private mail forwarding service, one she'd used to reroute sensitive documents for at least 8 residents. The most damning moment came when one of Elaine's former bridge friends took the stand. Her name was Gloria, and she looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She told me she was cleaning up the neighborhood, Gloria said, voice trembling. Said if we got enough properties under HOA control, we could sell them to developers for triple. Angela leaned in. Did she ever mention how she planned to take control of the houses? Gloria nodded, eyes glassy. She said people wouldn't fight if they didn't know they were in trouble until it was too late. That sealed it. Elaine was denied a plea deal. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge didn't hold back. In my 30 years on the bench, she said, I have never seen such a calculated abuse of community trust. You did not simply break the law, you weaponized it. Elaine was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. No parole. The neighborhood held a block party the weekend after the verdict. Barbecue grills out front, kids playing flashlight tag, someone even brought a karaoke machine. It wasn't about celebrating her downfall, it was about reclaiming the space she'd poisoned. Mrs. Lai brought me a plate of ribs and said, you know, I never liked HOA meetings, but now I look forward to them. I raised my water bottle in salute. Power to the people. Later that night, I walked past Elaine's old house. The windows were dark. A handwritten sign taped to the door read, pending sale, no HOA access. I stood there a long moment, then turned and headed home. A new neighbor moved in 2 weeks later. Young couple just married. The wife asked if there were any quirks they should know about the area. I told her, yeah. Keep your mailbox locked, and if anyone ever says they work for the HOA, ask to see a badge, then laugh at them. She looked confused but smiled anyway. And just like that, life moved forward, quiet, steady, and finally free. The first fall rain had just rolled through when the letter arrived. Not the usual city envelope, not court-related, either a pale blue, handwritten, no return address. I found it in my mailbox, tucked under the weekly grocery flyer. Not exactly what I expected after everything that had unfolded the past few months. Inside was a short note. She did the same thing at her last HOA. Look up Ridgewood Park, 2009. You'll find what you need. No signature. I stared at it. The handwriting didn't match the one from that earlier green envelope. Someone else. Another thread. I hadn't thought about Ridgewood Park in years. It was a development about 30 minutes north, same cookie-cutter homes, same promises of community living. I didn't know Elaine had ever lived there, but curiosity has a gravity of its own. That night, I pulled up county records. Sure enough, Elaine Overton had been listed as the community liaison for Ridgewood Park Homeowners Association from 2008 to early 2010. No criminal records, no formal complaints on file. But buried in the meeting archives was a document titled Emergency Resolution 14B, Dissolution of Board. It was dated just weeks before her name disappeared from the directory. I dug deeper. The local paper, archived online, had a community column. One article stood out. Audit uncovers missing HOA funds, former president declines interview. The article was vague, citing accounting irregularities and lack of documentation. No charges were filed. But residents had demanded full board resignation after discovering that nearly $80,000 were unaccounted for. Elaine had packed up and moved out 2 months later. I called an old contact, Annie, who used to freelance for that same paper. She remembered the Ridgewood case. Everyone knew she was behind it, she said. But the board closed ranks. No one wanted to admit they'd let it happen. Plus, she'd convinced them to sign NDAs before she resigned. She ran the same playbook here, I said. She just got bolder this time. I sat back. Something wasn't adding up. Felony mail theft, financial exploitation, forgery, those were serious crimes. But the way Elaine operated, with layers of legal insulation and plausible deniability, suggested a level of planning that didn't come from someone acting alone. I went back to the files from her computer. Angela had granted me temporary access to transcripts and evidence for the neighborhood's internal review committee. One spreadsheet stood out now more than ever, a tab labeled Acquisition Partners. It listed a dozen shell companies. Real estate LLCs with generic names like Sable Creek Holdings and Harborstone Residential. I cross-referenced them with local property records. 4 homes in our neighborhood had been quietly sold to those same entities in the last year, each one after the original homeowner had mysteriously defaulted on payments or failed to respond to compliance letters they never received. Mildred's house was one of them. Her son had stepped in just in time to stop the sale, but another family hadn't been so lucky. I called Angela that night. She wasn't just manipulating the HOA for power, I said. She was flipping properties. Angela didn't hesitate. Send me the LLC names. I'll loop in financial crimes. It took 2 weeks for the new task force to connect the dots. Elaine had been working with a man named Curtis Bledsoe, a realtor and former mortgage broker with a revoked license. He was the registered agent for half the shell companies. The other half were tied to his cousin, a disbarred attorney who'd once specialized in foreclosure law. The scheme was clear now. Elaine weaponized the HOA to create artificial violations, suppressed legal notices by intercepting mail, then allowed the phantom fines and unpaid fees to snowball until liens could be filed. Once the property was technically in breach, the HOA under her control approved a quiet foreclosure or forced sale. Curtis's companies bought the homes at below market prices, renovated just enough to pass code, then flipped them within 6 months. They'd done this in at least 3 other neighborhoods spanning 2 counties. But this time, they'd left a trail. Angela worked with the state to file expanded charges. Elaine was indicted again, this time for racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. Curtis and his cousin were arrested the same week at a golf resort in Arizona. The courtroom was packed during the new trial. Some of the families who had lost their homes sat in the front row. This time, Elaine didn't look smug. She looked small. The prosecution laid it out with brutal clarity. Forged documents, altered compliance letters, digital metadata proving she'd edited official notices before printing them. A forensic accountant testified that over $900,000 in profit had passed through Curtis's shell companies, with Elaine receiving kickbacks deposited into an account under a fabricated consulting firm. When the verdict came, It wasn't just a guilty conviction, it was a statement. 28 years, no parole, full asset forfeiture. She'd die in prison. After the sentencing, the judge ordered a formal restitution process. Families who'd lost homes would be compensated through asset liquidation. The state seized 3 properties owned under aliases linked to Elaine, including a lakeside cabin and a high-rise condo. The neighborhood board issued a final report detailing the entire scheme. Mrs. Patel had it published in the city paper under the title, "How One Community Took Back Its Voice." The HOA itself underwent a full transformation. Annual elections were now supervised by a third-party mediator. All compliance notices required 2 signatures and video documentation. Any board member who served more than 1 term had to pass a background check approved by the state's Community Regulation Office. And perhaps most importantly, the HOA lost its authority to levy fines without a public hearing. From now on, no one would wake up to a penalty they hadn't seen coming. A year passed. The scars remained, but the neighborhood had healed. I kept in touch with Mildred's son. He'd moved in permanently to take care of her. The Nuyens opened a noodle shop downtown and business was booming. Darren was promoted to lieutenant, and the county used the case as a training model for identifying fraud in HOA governance. As for me, I stayed put. My mailbox was still locked, but the camera was long gone. I didn't need it anymore. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the houses, Mrs. Patel stopped by with a clipboard. "We're starting a community garden," she said. "Thought you might want to be involved." I looked at the space. She pointed to an empty lot where Elaine's house had once stood. The bank had bulldozed it after the court seizure. No one wanted the structure. But the land, that was still ours. "I'll bring the tools," I said. She smiled, eyes sharp as ever. "Good, we've got tomatoes going in next week." We stood there a moment longer, watching the wind rustle through the open space. No walls, no fences, just fresh soil and clean air. It was quiet. And this time, it was the good